Bien, bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à cette présentation.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I want to introduce George Sevrinka, will lead us in our CAPP-Canada prayer, which we encourage members and friends to say on a daily basis to support our mission. So, George.
Okay, thank you, Cecil. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Through the intercession of our founder, St. John Paul II, guide us in our mission to transform our society by bringing it into greater conformity with the principles of the gospel. Amen.
A brief introduction to CAPP-Canada. We're a national chapter of the Fondazione Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice, a Vatican-based lay-run foundation established by Pope John Paul II in 1993, so 30 years ago this June, with the primary mission of promoting a deeper knowledge and application of Catholic social teaching among lay Catholics. So in other words, we're aiming to help lay Catholic leaders in Canada form their conscience in accordance with the fundamental principles of Catholic social teaching: dignity of the human person, solidarity, subsidiarity, in order that they in turn may help advance the common good and the spirit and presence of the gospel throughout Canadian society and elsewhere. So CAPP members and friends also support the charitable works of the Holy Father. Now, just over a week from now, some of us will be in Rome with others around the world for the 30th anniversary conference of the CAPP Foundation. And this series, for which we have the last of 3 workshops today, this series is part of our plans to mark this special anniversary with a bit of an emphasis on Fratelli Tutti. And the theme for the conference coming up in Rome, by the way, is Memory to Build the Future. So it's looking back at the last 30 years of CAPP's mission and ahead to the future. And at the end of this event, we're hoping to get some of your input, not on the last 30 years, but on the last 3 talks, so that we can improve what we do going forward and maybe respond better to the needs that you have and the interests that you have as well. So, Danielle?
Thank you, Cecil. I'm Danielle Morin, along with Cecil Chabot. We are the coordinator of this Canadian chapter of the CAPP Foundation. And to prepare us and to learn more about the Catholic social teaching, so we have put together this series of 3 workshops. Since we live, and nobody will say it's not true, but we live in an increasingly polarized culture where social media can become anti-social and social justice unjust. Challenging questions of our time frequently reduced to ideological battlegrounds where virtue signaling is often valued over virtual leadership. Division defeats dialogue, and wokeness fails to awaken us to the dignity of all of us. Our aim in organizing this series was to begin a conversation about the ways in which the environment, human dignity, solidarity, and subsidiarity, the core principle of Catholic social teaching, can be a life-saving medicine for an ideologically polarized society. Some of you were with us. Our first workshop on March 25th featured a talk by Andrea Bortelli on the wisdom of Fratelli Tutti in a woke culture. Our second workshop, and that was in April, it's about the care for the environment and human dignity. And John Zucchi was our speaker. If you missed the previous 2 events, they are recorded and you can access them. And I'm sure you will enjoy them on our website, www.cappcanada.ca/past events. So these important talks are, at this point, our 3rd talk. And we are pleased to welcome Alexandre Havard, who will address the theme of magnanimity, a virtue for polarized times. I think one of the main important things that you will probably practice today is this word, magnanimity. We don't put that too often in conversation. So this is the virtue of greatness of heart, the habit of seeing, emphasizing, and cultivating the best in ourselves and in others in order to better serve the common good. So Mr. Havard, the founder of the Virtuous Leadership System with more than 20 institutes around the world, will share today the compelling vision for living magnanimously, try that one, and how it leads to always see and nourish the inherent dignity and good in others, to cultivate and exercise solidarity, and to uphold subsidiarity, even and especially in context of serious disagreement. So my colleague Cecil will introduce today's session and introduce our speaker that we are very happy to have with us today. Cecil.
Thanks, Danielle. So basically, we'll have a presentation now by Alex, breakout room discussions of about 10 minutes, and then followed by a Q&A and then a conclusion. So as we mentioned, if you want to participate in a French breakout group, indicate that in the chat. And for those of you who just come in a little later, we do have interpretation in French, and look for the globe symbol in order to access that simultaneous translation. And if you need any tech support for anything, message Paul Mullen in the chat. So Alexandre Havard, as mentioned already, is the founder of the Virtuous Leadership Institute. Born in Paris, he graduated from the René Descartes University, one of France's leading law schools, and has practiced law in several European countries. Now based in Moscow, he travels virtually and otherwise around the globe, offering seminars in virtuous leadership to very diverse audiences. In addition to these speaking engagements, he has written multiple books on the subject, including Virtuous Leadership, An Agenda for Personal Excellence, Created for Greatness, The Power of Magnanimity, From Temperament to Character, Free Hearts, Understanding Your Deepest Motivations, Coached by Joan of Arc, and others. These books and his own autobiography, My Russian Way, have been translated into many languages. I've had the privilege of knowing Mr. Havard for over a decade, and I always find his talks inspiring and rich with new insights. So Alex, it is a great privilege to welcome you here today. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much, Susan. So the word is mine.
Yes.
Okay, guys, so I'm very happy to be with you today, speaking about this great topic of magnanimity. I was thinking about first giving you some theoretical information about what is magnanimity, because you know, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the word magnanimity is pronounced only once. When the word humility is maybe 100 times. This shows that magnanimity has to be, we have to work on it. We have to speak more about magnanimity, because we've heard a lot about humility. We've been educated in humility. Oh, Jeff, I'm happy to see you. Jeff, hello. So I was thinking about giving you some information about what is the virtue of magnanimity, to make it clear, because many people have a confused vision of what magnanimity is. And then I'm used to make things very practical. I'm not in the academy. I am more a practitioner. So I propose you to give you after 4 or 5 examples of people that I think really have practiced magnanimity in the modern world, in a polarized world, as you say. And I think it's good to see those examples and try to see how does these people appeal to us, and how can we personally practice the virtue of magnanimity. So I can share some. Do you see something here?
We only see you.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, you have to give me the right to do that.
Yes. Paul?
Yeah, you have to give me the right. I don't have it. Okay. You see something?
Yes.
Okay, guys. So look at the what I've written on the left of this slide. You heard about the 4 cardinal virtues, of course: prudence, making right decisions; courage, running risks, staying the course; self-mastery, tracking passions; and justice, giving everyone his due. These are the 4 cardinal virtues you heard about. We're not going to speak about those virtues. These are the virtues that give integrity. These are fundamentally virtues of the intellect and the will, and they are the foundation of leadership. If we don't have those 4 virtues, don't think about magnanimity. Magnanimity comes after. It is not a basic virtue. It's not a cardinal virtue. Magnanimity is the virtue of excellence, and excellence comes after the basic virtues, obviously. Of course, you see at the bottom of the pyramid, I put fundamental humility, which is self-knowledge, because this is the foundation of the foundation. This is the foundation even of the cardinal virtues. It is self-knowledge. It is the virtue of humility. And at the top of the pyramid, you see magnanimity, which is striving towards great things. It is the virtue of great people. It is one of the specific virtues of leaders, because leadership is about achieving greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. So you have to be magnanimous if you want to be a leader. You have to have a vision of greatness. You have to inspire greatness in other people. And the top of the pyramid is what I call fraternal humility, serving others. So you see, humility is both the foundation of the foundation and also the top of the pyramid. But this is passive humility, self-knowledge, and this is active humility. It is service to others. So leadership is about achieving greatness, magnanimity, bringing out greatness in others. That's humility. That's the service. So I've been showing you, I'm showing you this pyramid so that you understand where, in the virtuous leadership system, what's the place of magnanimity. Magnanimity, it's the top. It's the essence of leadership. It's one of the 2 virtues that are the essence of leadership: magnanimity and humility as a service. So now the question is, how do we, very quickly, I'm giving you just some theoretical information so that you can understand well what we're speaking about. As you remember, prudence is the mother of all the virtues, because prudence helps us understand in concrete situations, how do you practice the virtues? If you don't have prudence, well, you may be reckless instead of being audacious. You know, people that have no virtue, they will be cowards. When you try to practice audacity, if you try to practice it without prudence, you will fall into recklessness. So the same for self-mastery. You are intemperate, but one day you decide to have self-mastery. So you make an effort of the will to be self-mastered. But if you don't have prudence, you will fall into insensitivity. You got it. If you want to be just, you are unjust, but one day you say, I want to be just. So you begin to work on yourself. You try to practice justice, but unfortunately you don't have prudence. So you fall into harshness, which is not justice. The same for magnanimity. Maybe you're a small man, a small woman, you are pusillanimous, but one day you say, I want to be magnanimous, Alex, help me. So, but if you're magnanimous, if you want to be magnanimous without practicing the virtue of prudence, you will fall into pride. What you will do will not be magnanimity. What magnanimity will be pride. I will give you some examples how not to fall into pride. And then you have humility. You are a proud person and say, one day I want to be humble. So you try to work on your humility, but because you have no prudence, you fall into pusillanimity. So you see, guys, this is beautiful theory, but this shows how much the virtue of prudence is very much in all the virtues. If we don't have prudence, we just cannot practice the virtues, because either there will be a lack of virtue on the left, you know, or false virtue on the right, but you will not be in the middle. You got it. So this is a very important graphic, a diagram, which shows you very much the importance of prudence in all the virtues and also in the virtue of magnanimity. So I want to give you an advice, guys. Magnanimity, it's about fundamentally acknowledging your talents, multiplying your talents, but so you have to be capable of speaking about your talents. You have to be capable of speaking about the great things that you have. If not, you cannot be magnanimous. To be magnanimous, you first need to acknowledge your capacity for contemplation and action. You need to acknowledge your dignity. You need to acknowledge the talents that you have received from God, from nature. And you have to be aware of those talents, and you have to work on those talents. You have to multiply them. So the question is, how do we speak of our talents? How do we discover our talents? What's the methodology to do that in a natural way? Remember always two things. To be magnanimous, first you need to be aware of your talents. If you're afraid of your talents, you cannot be magnanimous. Second, not to fall into pride, you need to be aware that the origin of your talents, the source of your talents, it's God, it's not you. So you have not produced your talents. It's a gift that has been given to you. You can multiply it, you can work on it, but the origin and the source of your talent, it's not you. And if you know those two things, you will be magnanimous. You get it? Very important. To be magnanimous, you need two things. First, to be aware of your talents, to acknowledge all your talents. And second, to be aware that those talents are gifts to you and you're responsible for them, but they are not your talents. You have not produced them. They've been given to you by God or by nature. If you know those things, you will relate to your talents in a very natural way. You will be a magnanimous person. If one of those two elements is lacking in your life, you will fall into pusillanimity. I don't want to know my talents. I have no talents. I am a nobody. I am a sinner. You got it? Or if you say, I have a lot of talents and these talents are the product of my activity, you fall into pride. So these are very practical things I tell you. I tell all my students who ask me, Alex, in practice, how can we be sure that we are not falling into pusillanimity or into pride? The answer is here. Acknowledge your talents and acknowledge the fact that your talents are talents given by God to you. If you have those two things in your head and in your heart, you can be very easily a magnanimous person. You got it? So now we go to the second question, which is, what is the content of magnanimity? Aristotle tells us the magnanimous person considers himself worthy of great things. So in Aristotle, there is a vision of magnanimity as being worthiness. You're worthy and greatness. So a magnanimous person is someone who considers himself worthy of great things, which means that he has a vision of self that is wonderful, that is true. He has a vision of what a human being is, a spiritual being, free will, rational mind, big heart, human nature. This is what the vision of Aristotle. It's a vision of a philosopher. It's fundamentally contemplation. For Aristotle, magnanimity is not about action. Magnanimity is fundamentally about a vision of what you are, a vision of the greatness of the human being, the vision of your personal greatness, because you are a human being and not a chimpanzee. You got it. Then came Thomas of Aquinas in the Middle Ages. And Thomas, of course, is not a Greek, he's a Roman. And Romans like action. They want action. So Thomas, he took the definition of Aristotle and he added something. He just changed a word. He said the magnanimous person considers himself worthy of doing great things. You see the difference? Worthy of great things, worthy of doing great things. So Thomas added a word, doing. So for Thomas, magnanimity is not just about contemplation. It is fundamentally about action. Okay? These are dreamers. Aristotle, the dreamers. And Thomas of Aquinas, these are the doers. You got it. So my vision is that both things are very important in magnanimity. It's not just about doing great things. It's fundamentally, and first, it is about a vision of self. So a magnanimous person is someone that has a vision of self and say, I am a great person because I'm a human being. I'm not a chimpanzee. I have a spirit. And if you're a Christian, it's even more clear. You're a son of God. There is no better foundation for magnanimity than Christianity, because only Christianity tells people you're a son of God. You've been redeemed in the blood of Christ. You are worth all the blood of Jesus Christ. So for Christians, of course, Christians have all the elements, all the foundations for absolute magnanimity. Aristotle had only a human vision of the human person. He knew nothing about supernatural grace. So he knew only the human dignity as it is given by nature. But Christians, we know that they are much more than this. We also are children of God. So we have all the elements. We have much more than Aristotle to be magnanimous. Aristotle was magnanimous, obviously, but imagine he was magnanimous without Christ. We have Christ, so we Christians should be much more magnanimous than Aristotle, because we have more foundation for magnanimity. We have the whole vision of the dignity of the human person. Aristotle had just a vision of the human aspect of the dignity of the human person. You got it. But Aristotle gave us a beautiful indication, a beautiful direction for our thoughts. And then Thomas, it's about action. So in leadership, in magnanimity, you have the two things. Then you have to think. You have to think about yourself. Before coming to practical examples, I want to show you the impact of the temperaments on magnanimity. If you're a choleric person, you will not have problem with action because you are self-confident, always in action. So what you're going to need is contemplation, because choleric people that are action-oriented, they are prone to blind activism. So there is a lack of contemplation very often in the choleric people. They are just doing things for the sake of doing them, but there is no real place for contemplation, and then it's difficult for them to be magnanimous from the point of view of contemplation. If you are a melancholic person, you have no problem with contemplation because you are introvert, you are very much aware of your personal dignity, you are aware of your talents, you are a dreamer, but the problem is that action is lacking in your life. You're afraid of action. So if you want to be magnanimous and you're a melancholic, you'd better work on the virtue of action, which is audacity. You got it. If you're a sanguine person, the sanguine people are very people-oriented people. Well, they have difficulty with contemplation because they have a tendency to be superficial in their reflections. But they love adventure. So it's easy for them to begin a new thing, to begin a new big stuff, a big challenge. So they don't have problem with the action. The problem what they have is that they are unstable in their actions. So the sanguine people don't terminate the job, don't finish the job. They just begin, but they don't terminate. And we know that magnanimity is about finishing the job. It's not just about beginning the job. You got it. So if you're sanguine, you have two challenges. First, you have to quit your superficiality in thinking, and second, you have to be stable. You have to be endurant. You have to be persistent in all your enterprises. If you're a phlegmatic person, you may have a lot of problems with magnanimity, because the phlegmatic people that are peace-oriented, passionate, they go along with the status quo and conform to the expectations and goals of those around them. They love security and routine. So at the level of contemplation, phlegmatic people have a problem. They don't have dreams. The melancholic people, they have dreams, but they don't know how to put them into effect. But the phlegmatic people, their problem is deeper. They don't dream. They're afraid of dream because the dream is madness for them. You see? And they have also a problem with action because they perceive tasks as formidable and obstacles as insurmountable. So they have difficulties to identify their talents. So the phlegmatic people have a lot of difficulties to be magnanimous, but I will show you examples of people who have been phlegmatic and absolute magnanimity. So those of you who are phlegmatic by biological temperament, don't worry. You can be very, very magnanimous. It's not a problem. If you have character, you will be magnanimous. These are just biological tendencies. And magnanimity is not about biology. It's about spirit. It's about character. It's about virtue. But it's important to know the temperament well, because you see immediately where is going to be, what's going to be your challenge in life. And you have to know what's going to be your challenge in order to work on this and in order to become a virtuous person. So that's why I like to speak about to speak about the temperaments helps us very much understand how each one of us should practice the virtue. Got it. So now I want to give you some examples of people that I think have been very magnanimous in a polarized world. Oh, look at those guys. I'm sure you recognize them. I mean, two of them are in a process of canonization. It's the one in the right. It's Robert Schumann. The one in the center, it's Alcide de Gasperi. And the one on the left, Konrad Adenauer, was a great Catholic. I mean, there were three Catholics, high standing. They spoke German together. They were good friends. That's 1950. What's the context? It's just after the Second World War. Germany has made 3 wars against the French. 1817, 1914, 1940. After the war, after the Second World War, what's in the mind of people? The same thing as in 1918. Germany will pay. That's so simple. History repeats itself. In the mind of people, Germany, they are the bad guys. The Germans have to pay. We'll destroy them. Even General de Gaulle, who was also a magnanimous person, went to Moscow to make a deal with the Russians, with the Soviet, in order to be sure that the Germans will not attack France anymore. So what happens? The whole country of France, all of Western Europe, not Germany, of course, they still think that the Germans are the bad guys. And there is a guy here on the right, Robert Schumann. He's a very magnanimous person. He's 100% phlegmatic. And when he speaks, people sleep. People fall asleep because the guy is very boring. He's absolutely boring when he talks, and people fall asleep when they hear him. He's an absolute phlegmatic who has no much capacity for communication. What happens? This guy is saying one thing that is a revolution at that time. He's saying, look, guys, we lost the peace in 1918. We are doing now the same mistake as in 1918. We are preparing a 4th World War, a 3rd World War. And he said, we should finish with that. That's impossible. We have to win that peace. And the way to win that peace, it is to understand the Germans, to be friends with the Germans, to put our economy together, our raw materials together, and create the condition for permanent peace. This guy is not understood. People don't understand him. His imagination is very Christian. He's deeply Christian. He wants peace. He's ready to forgive. He was in jail. This guy was the first French deputy that was in jail, in the Nazi jail. He was arrested by the Germans because he was a deputy in Lorraine, in the east part of France. So he was the first deputy of the French parliament to be arrested by the Gestapo. He was in the Gestapo jail. He was sent to Germany, and he escaped from Germany to France in 1941. And he joined of course, the resistance with General de Gaulle, and he became Minister of Foreign Affairs. This guy was a dreamer. He was dreaming not like the other people dreaming. People was dreaming about destroying Germany once forever, once for all. And this guy understood, no, guys. No, that doesn't work. We have now to make a real peace with the Germans. We have to understand them. We have to forgive them. We have to create something in common. The guy in the middle, Alcide de Gasperi, he was in jail in Italy. He was in jail in Mussolini's times, 1928, and then after he escaped to the Vatican, he was in a concentration camp in the Vatican for 10 years. Couldn't get out of that. He found refuge in the Vatican, and he was in the Vatican until the end of the Second World War. He's the founder of the Christian democracy in Italy. He's in the process of canonization also. Robert Schuman on the right, he's already a venerable, which means the church has recognized the historicity of his virtues. We're waiting for a miracle for him to be beatified. But the church already recognized the historicity of his virtues. And he was extremely magnanimous. He had a lot of supernatural virtues, but he had also a lot of human virtues. And specifically, he had the virtue of magnanimity. He was a dreamer, and he wanted to transform his dream into a mission. The guy on the left was also a Catholic. His name is Konrad Adenauer. He was the major of the city of Köln. He was thrown out by Hitler in 1933. He came back after the war, and he was thrown out again by the English because he didn't like what the British was doing there. And then he was thrown out, and that's why he decided to create the Christian democracy in Germany. He was on the way to be sent to Gulag, to German concentration camps, but the last second he was saved from it. Those guys have suffered a lot. Those guys were deeply Christians. They were practicing the three supernatural virtues of faith, hope, and charity. At the same time, they were practicing the human virtues, and specifically, they were dreamers, they were magnanimous people. So you see, guys, this is very important because all the world, all the French people, all the British, all the people after the Second World War, they say, we have to end up with Germany. These guys are crazy. They made 2 wars. We have to kill them all, destroy them all. And here you have 3 magnanimous people who say, guys, you are crazy. Not the Germans, you are the crazy people. You don't understand what you're doing. You are preparing the Third World War. We don't want that. So together, they decided to build the European Union. This institution that has nothing to do with what we have now, unfortunately. But at the beginning, it was a very clear and a very moral, beautiful thing. Of course, in the 1970s, European Union was inspired, was imbued with other values that were exactly the opposite of the values that inspired the founder. But that's another story for another book. But what they did in 1950 was extraordinarily magnanimous. It's one of the most magnanimous enterprises in the history of Europe. It was just a miracle. The miracle of having 3 guys who were saints, who were Catholics, who were magnanimous at the same time and spoke the same language in common, the German. Well, because the Gasperi was from the north of Italy, and there people spoke German. And Robert Schuman, he studied in Germany, in Bonn, many years before the war, so he spoke fluent German. He was born in Luxembourg. And of course, Alcide de Gasperi, Konrad Adenauer was a German himself. So these guys could speak the same language. They had the same faith. The 3 of them were saints, and they were extremely magnanimous. These are models for us, guys. And when people criticize them today because they see the collapse of European Union at the level of values, I tell them, look, what European Union was in 1950, it's not what it is now. Those guys did the job. Other people destroyed it. But this is not the responsibility of those 3 guys. You got it. It's like the United States of America. You had great founders, Jefferson, Adams, Washington. You can't say that those guys are responsible for what Biden is doing in the world. You cannot say that. They are other people, absolutely nothing in common, and they are not responsible for what happened after them. Each generation has to produce its people. Each generation has to practice the virtues. It's not because your founders were virtuous people that you will be virtuous. You have to practice the virtues if you want to resemble your founders. Okay, this is the first example that tells us, look, we have to have imagination, we have to have love. In order to be magnanimous, we have to get out of what the general public is thinking. We have to find originality. And I think our Christian faith gives us a lot of imagination if we want magnanimity. And I repeat, this guy on the right, who is venerable, was a boring guy when he was speaking. He was a phlegmatic. So those of us who are phlegmatic must not think, I cannot be like Schumann. Yes, you can. If you're phlegmatic, it doesn't mean you cannot dream and you cannot transform your dream into a mission. You can do it. It's a question of magnanimity. It's a question of character. Leadership is not a question of temperament. It's a question of character. So this guy should be someone you will never forget. Robert Schumann. This guy is a Russian. Peter Stolypin. He was the first minister of Tsar Nikolai II. Stolypin was a monarchist because he was educated as a monarchist. It was a time in Russia where you had on one side the conservative people, and on the right side, on the other side, you have the socialists, the Bolsheviks, future Bolsheviks. He was hated by both. The Bolshevik, I mean the left, the right, people of the right, the conservative people hated him because he wanted the workers to become, I mean the peasants to become owners of the land. He thought that the peasants have to be owners. And the conservative people didn't want that because they wanted to keep their own power, to be the owner themselves. They didn't want the peasants to be the owner of the land. And Stolypin wanted, he said, this is the only way out for Russia. We have to have owners. When you have owners, people understand what's property. And if you're not an owner, you don't understand what's property, and then you take the property of the others. It's so simple. So if you want to respect the property of the others, you have to be an owner yourself. You need to have an experience of ownership. He was an incredible guy. He was hated also by the Bolshevik on the right, on the left, because the Bolshevik understood if this guy will make his reform of the peasantry and will make them owners, then there will not be any opposition to the Tsar, and then all the Bolshevik and the socialism will lose its ground on the ideological field. So they hated him. And both sides decided to kill him. And there was 11 attempts to kill him. 11 times they tried to kill him. And in 1911, they succeeded. He was killed in 1911 in Kiev in the theater. But 6 months before dying, he wrote in his testament, "Bury me where I will be killed. Bury me where I will be killed." Just, you can imagine the guy. It's an incredible courage, an incredible vision of what he's doing. He understands he will be killed, but he does not waver. Magnanimity. This is magnanimity because the guy has a vision that is absolutely revolutionary, that is totally Christian. This guy is a real Christian. He prays every day, and he offers his life to Christ every day before going to bed, because he knows that maybe tomorrow I die. Tomorrow I will be killed. I know one day I will be killed, but I don't know when. So he's a man of prayer, like Schumann. He's a good practicing Orthodox, and he's fundamentally a man of virtue and of magnanimity. He has a vision. He has a vision. We have to make peasants owners. This is the way out. This is justice. This is good for the country. This is good for the world. And this is very bad for the Bolshevik. And what is bad for the Bolshevik is good for God. You know, this is a vision of the guy, and this is an example of magnanimity. You know, the magnanimous people in a polarized world, they have a way out. Not the right, not the left, not the middle, something new, something others. Exactly like Schumann, De Gasperi, and Adenauer. Jérôme Lejeune, you know about him. He was my friend. I like to speak about him. He's the French geneticist who in 1958 discovered the cause of Down syndrome. Jérôme is an extraordinary person. Jérôme, he was in 1958, he discovered the cause of syndrome of Down. Then he went to the United States, to San Francisco, to receive the prize. And he talked to people there, and he discovered that those guys are really very bad. I mean, they were very happy of his discovering because they want now to kill. They says, thank you, Jérôme. Now we know where those guys are, the syndrome, the Down people. Then we can kill them all. Jérôme was shocked. But Jérôme understood. I'm not going to speak as a theologian, although I know theology. I'm not going to speak as a philosopher, although I know philosophy. I'm going to speak as a scientist. And I will explain the whole world what is an embryo from a scientific point of view. I will speak a scientific truth all my life, and I will stick to it. And he begins to explain that if a child is not a child, is not a human being at the moment of conception, it will never become. Never, because nothing substantial happens after fertilization. So it is a human being. So he will speak all his life. He's a phlegmatic. He's not boring. Jérôme was not a boring person, but he's a phlegmatic 100%, like many people of science. He's a scientist. He's a deep Christian. He's a man of prayer. And he understands now what's beginning, we call what's coming on, what's coming now in the world is the culture of death, the pro-death people. And so he understands in this context, I, a Christian, what should I do? And he understands with his imagination, I am a scientist. I have to speak the scientific truth, from which stems, of course, a moral truth, but I am a scientist. So I have to speak the truth, scientific truth. And he would speak all his life, scientific truth. Jérôme is venerable. The church has declared the heroicity of his virtues. As an extraordinary man, I spent a lot of time with him in Finland, in Sweden, in France. He's a saint. This guy understood the situation of the world. He understood that he could not take, of course, he could not support a culture of death. But at the same time, his job was not to speak as a philosopher or theologian. His job was to speak as a scientist. He uses imagination and his talents. He had talents, incredible talents as a scientist. They created for him the Sorbonne created for him when he was 36 years old, the chair of fundamental genetics. He was the youngest professor of medicine in France. This is an example of magnanimity, guys. Phlegmatic people can be extremely magnanimous. In a polarized world, they can understand very well what they have to do, and they stick to their decisions till the end. And Jérôme was crucified by the media. They took his money. He couldn't work. He had to beg money all over the world to go on with his research. He died the day of Easter, 1994. And he was my friend. And on his tomb, it's written Nika. As you know, you speak Greek, which means victory. This guy is a prophet. When people will come back to earth, I mean, with the Holy Spirit will inspire all the human beings on earth, and they will understand what was the culture of death, and that was absolutely wrong. They will remember Jérôme. The world will remember Jérôme Lejeune. And I promise you, there will be a statue of Jérôme Lejeune in all the squares of all the capital of the world. Because he was a prophet of his times. So he was a prophet. Magnanimity. Magnanimity is a beautiful virtue. It means you use your imagination and you use your talents the most as you can. And the last one I want to speak about is Alexandre Havard. I knew him. I spent time with him in his house close to Moscow in 2003. That was 5 years before he died. He was bright. He was smiling. He was a very happy person, although he had suffered a lot. Solzhenitsyn, the same thing. It's a person who understands the world where he lives in. On one side, the Bolsheviks. He hates Bolshevism. He said this is absolute evil. He fights against Bolshevism alone during many years. He gets the Nobel Prize for Literature. He's a Christian. He became a Christian. He was baptized when he was young. He was born in 1918, but he lost his faith, of course, in the Bolshevik years of the 30s. But he came back to his faith in jail, to the faith of his childhood. He understood there is on one side there is Bolshevism. On the other side, you have absolute liberalism that does not understand anything about the human person. He's thrown out of Russia. He goes to France. Then after he went to Vermont in the United States. In the United States, he begins to speak with people, and he understands that these people are also crazy. That these people think they have built a civilization that is going to last forever, but it is a civilization where there is no God. It's a civilization that is based only on law, on structures. There is no place for the human being. They will collapse also. He's a prophet. He foresaw all the things that come after, things we know about, the gender things, the wokeness, all that. He foresees it very well. So he's the kind of guy who didn't surrender. He didn't say, well, I am not a Bolshevik, then I am a liberal. He said, no, I'm not a Bolshevik. And for the same reason as I am not a Bolshevik, I am not a liberal. Because the foundation of liberalism and the foundation of communism are the same, exactly the same. Materialism and naturalism. Denial of the original sin. So this guy is brilliant. He's depression. He has a vision of the world. He does not surrender. He didn't surrender to Bolshevism, and he will never surrender to liberalism. Never. That's why the West will hate him in the end of the day. He'll be hated by both. He stick until the last day to his vision because he was a real Christian. This is absolute magnanimity. So I have given to you guys 4 examples of people that I think are known people. They've been extremely very magnanimous. These are people that have been practicing contemplation and action. They have both a vision of the human being and a vision of action and action. So they are action people, although some of them are not choleric at all. They are the opposite. They are phlegmatic. They were people of action, people with a dream and people with action in their lives. They had courage, they had audacity, they had the 4 cardinal virtues, and that's why they could become magnanimous. The dream and the action, the dream and the mission, philosophers and doers. This is what those people are. Philosophers and doers at the same time. This is what we have to be. And you see, there is a big part of imagination. When you're a Christian, you have to use your imagination. You have to use your talents and your imagination to understand how you get out of that. How do you get out of this polarization? There is a way out. The world in which we live wants you to be polarized. You have to be for Biden or you have to be for Putin. And there is no way out. You don't be polarized, guys. You have to find a way out. You are Christians. You want to be magnanimous, that you have to be creative, creativity. I think this is the key word. It's Christian creativity. Thank you, guys.
Alex, how can we better cultivate dreaming?
You have people that don't need to cultivate it because they are dreamers, because they are the melancholic people are naturally dreamers. So those who need to cultivate dreaming are fundamentally the phlegmatic people. You cultivate dreaming fundamentally by reading books that makes you dream. By reading a lot about the story of those people, for instance, I've been speaking about. You need to have a lot of examples of dreamers around that inspire you and help you think how we dream. You have to contemplate magnanimous people to understand how they feel, how they think, and how they act. So you need not to hear a course on magnanimity. You need just to read or watch movies about those people, and you little by little understand the way they think, the way they feel, and the way they act. And little by little, this inspires you and help you do the thing. Obviously, Jérôme Lejeune and Robert Schumann were not born dreamers, but they became dreamers because they read the good books. They watched the right movies. They were told the right things, and they were inspired by that. So they were not born to dream. They became dreamers because they became magnanimous, and they became magnanimous by doing the job. And the job was fundamentally getting yourself inspired by culture, by movies, by music, by all that what is culture. All that is culture can inspire a lot of phlegmatic people and can give them a lot of ideas and can move their imagination forward. You need to spend time with magnanimous people. And then you discover that it is nice, that it's beautiful, that it's attractive, that it's inspiring. I think that by little you begin to do the job, you begin to dream. You stop thinking that a dream is madness. Phlegmatic people are very, very rational, very scientific. So for them, dreaming is not rational. It's not mathematics. It's very irrational. It's very, it's madness for them. So they need to stop thinking that it's madness. They need to begin to think that no, it's not madness. Human beings have to dream. If they don't dream, they are not humans. So that's it. The way is you need to understand that if you're not dreaming, it's no good. It's not scientific. It's the opposite. If you have a scientific vision of what a human being is, you will understand that you have to have a dream. That the dream is not madness. It is natural. What is madness is not to dream, being a human being. So phlegmatic people need to reconsider the meaning of a dream.
Andrea Bartoli in the first talk spoke about, in South Sudan, to propose the option of peace is to perhaps draw in a death sentence, right? It's polarizing, but it's polarizing towards life. The examples you gave were all in that line. So how do we discern the difference between the moments when we have to healthily polarize in that way versus where humility requires us to listen to others, to consider where we might be wrong? How do we discern the difference?
Well, the key thing is that there is no opposition at all between magnanimity and humility. I mean, these are just a different vision of the same metal, different sides of the same metal. So there shouldn't be any opposition at all. To listen is obviously necessary, and magnanimous people have to be capable of listening. But as I told you, the magnanimity, if you have a vision of your talents and you have a vision of the origin of the source of your talents, then there is no problem for you to be magnanimous. I mean, humility cannot be an obstacle to magnanimity. You should be aware of that you may have a tendency, especially if you are imbued with Catholic doctrine, not so well assimilated, because I repeat the word humility. The Catholic doctrine very often doesn't help us be magnanimous because it's all about humility. But they don't explain well that humility without magnanimity is not true humility. It is something else. It's pusillanimity. So the truth is that if you really want to be humble, because this is for you a priority, then you have to think there is no humility without magnanimity. If there is no action, there is no service, there is no dream in my life, there is no humility at all. Because humility is the habit of living in the truth. And the truth is that you have talents and you have to use it. You need to remember this sentence all the time. You need to go back to the roots. What is humility? Humility, it is the habit of living in the truth. What's the truth? The truth is that, yes, I'm a sinner. Yes, I have weaknesses, but also I have strength, I have powers, I have talents, and I have to use them. So if I don't use them, I am not in the truth. I am outside. And my humility, in fact, is pusillanimity. And I am lying to myself and I am lying to the others when I'm telling them that I'm humble. You got it? So Christians have a tendency to be falsely humble. So to practice what we call miserabilism. Sorry, guys, that I exist. I shouldn't be here. I am nothing. I'm a sinner and I should be in the confessional. But this is what many Christians have a tendency to be. And this is the problem of our world. If you look at those who are leading the world today, you will see there is no one Catholic. Because they are in the confessionals. They are not in politics. They are not in business. They are not in finance. They are not in the arts. They are not in Hollywood. They are somewhere else. Where are they? In the confessionals. They are speaking about their sins and weaknesses. So we Catholic, we have a serious problem. The problem we have is that we didn't understand the meaning of humility. So we left all these fields of human activity where we thought this is for proud people. This is for the crazy people, not for Christians. You know, that's I have a friend, a Protestant friend in Hollywood, who wrote a book, How Working in Hollywood Without Losing Your Soul. 1,000 pages. You can read that book. He's still there. And he was in Moscow some years ago. I talked to him and he told me, look, Christians were not thrown out from Hollywood. They just left. They just left out of false humility. You got it, guys. So our problems as Catholics is fundamentally that we were raised in humility. But because we were not raised in magnanimity, our humility is not true humility. It's small-mindedness, small-heartedness, lack of action, lack of vision. We shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. That's what I tell people around. Magnanimity tells you don't be afraid of mistakes. You should be afraid of one thing, doing nothing. Just thinking, just writing books and doing nothing. You should be afraid of that. You know, should be afraid. Nowadays, in the death culture around, all those things, you shouldn't be afraid of going to jail. Many people are afraid of going to jail. Okay, so you shouldn't be afraid of anything. So we shouldn't be afraid. So that's what magnanimity is about. That's why we need to speak about it more and more.
How do you avoid being labeled on one pole? The question, maybe you're in the right pole, but let's say you are not, and you're labeled on one pole. How do you address that?
I think the right pole is you have to, in conscience, to decide what is the right pole for you, but it is not a pole that is obviously the majority pole.
How can the system of education better help develop magnanimity, especially in young people?
It's not a system of education, it's fundamentally your parents. It's when your parents tells you, look, you have those gifts, my friend, my child. You are very gifted at that. And the boy at 6, 10 years old already understand, this is my power. This is my power. And this is not my talent. It's been given to me. So the boy is at peace. The boy knows exactly that it is not something he has been developed. It is something that has been given to him. And he shouldn't be proud of it, but he should feel responsibility for it. So instead of speaking of the boys of his mistakes, you have to do it, of course, because you have to bring the boy to confession from time to time. But you have also to tell him, look, you are strong at that. This is you. I will help you multiply this because this is a gift that you have. And you have to be happy with this gift. And you have to feel responsible with this gift, and you have to multiply this gift. You give in a boy, in a child, you give a sense of personal responsibility, a sense of dignity, a sense of being happy. And it will grow with I would say it will grow in virtue ethics instead of rule-based ethics. He will understand everything is about him. Everything is about his virtues. Everything is about his talents. It's not about rules. It's about who am I? What should I do? What's my responsibility for what I have? So yes, I just mentioned the idea of virtue ethics. How do you educate people in virtue ethics? It's this. It's when you say to the child, look, you don't do this, not because it's forbidden, but because it's not you. You understand? You're much worth. You're much better than that. You are a great boy. You're a great girl. You're a daughter of God. That's why you don't do those things. If you tell them you don't do this because it's forbidden, you will not educate in virtue. You will educate in rules. So to educate in virtue, you need to give the child a sense of personal dignity. I don't do this because this is not me. I don't slander my friends because I am not the kind of person that slanders, not because I can go to jail if I slander. You get it? I am not the kind of person that does this. In my family, we don't do those things because we are different. You know, we are positively different. This is the way the Jews are have been educated, and that's why they have all the power in their hands in the whole world, because they don't have problems with that. We Catholics have so many problems with that that we don't have power at all because we don't need it. It's not for us. But I promise you, I know many Jews, they're educated like this. You're the best because you are sons of Abraham. So don't forget about that. Well, this is the best way to educate a child in magnanimity, is to tell him, look, this is what you are. Forget about these stupid things around. We Catholics, we have not been able to do those things, unfortunately, but we have to learn. So it's not much about the school, it's fundamentally about the parents. Parents should do the job first.
What sources of research could you recommend relating to your virtuous leadership system? Is it rooted in philosophy? Who are the key thinkers? You've mentioned some of them, but can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the best guys, from the virtue point of view, it's of course Joseph Pieper. The four cardinal virtues, Joseph Pieper is the best because the way he speaks is wonderful. And it's much better in English than in German. In German, people cannot read him. but the translation into English is so great that you understand it. At last, you understand what he's saying when you read the English translation. So you're very happy. If those who speak English, you're very lucky, because the only way to read Pieper is to read it in English, not in German, not in French, not in Spanish, in English. When the translators even got a prize for the translation. So I propose you to do this. Joseph Pieper, The Four Cardinal Virtues. He speaks also about magnanimity and humility in this book, The Four Cardinal Virtues. Then you should read, those who speak French, there is a beautiful book. It's called Magnanimity. It's not translated into English by a French Dominican who wrote in 1945 towards the end of the war. The book is called Magnanimité, l'idéal de la grandeur. It's a beautiful book. I don't remember it's the French Dominican who wrote it. You will find it. Well, but this is 2,000 pages. This is purely academic stuff, but it's very well written. It's beautiful French, and it's very understandable. So this is a book about magnanimity, and then the book on the virtues is Pieper, and then you have, of course, the book on the temperaments, the temperaments God gave you by Mr. and Mrs. I don't remember the name. So then you have Viktor Frankl. He has a lot of interesting things in terms of virtues, man's search for meaning. And then you have all my books, because I have written 7 books, and in each one of them I took the essence and the most important thing from those people. So I made people very accessible. So you have, in my 7 books, you have a lot of citations, reflections on what others have written about the topic. Very often books are complicated to read on the virtues because it's very complicated. People in the academy likes to make things complicated to be sure that people don't understand what they speak about. So what I've done myself, I try to speak in a normal language and give immediately an example. Every paragraph I have an example of. So people understand exactly what I'm speaking about. I am a practitioner. Of course, there is a deep philosophy behind this, a deep anthropology. There is John Paul II, obviously. I read all his stuff, and he has very interesting things to say about the virtues. That's why I mention him quite often. John Paul II, Pieper, Frankl. There is a lot of people who see all the sources in my books are there. I recommend you to read all my books because they are not big, they are not long. It's about 150 pages each. It's very easy to read. And you will see all the sources I mentioned. There is a lot of Russian literature there. You have a lot of Dostoevsky, you have Chekhov, you have Soloviev, you have all those great guys. You have to read those great guys, but also I popularize them for you so that you will recognize in what they say things that have a lot to do with virtuous leadership.
Alex, I think we'll just take this moment to thank you very much for joining us today, for taking the time to share with us the wisdom that you've gathered and reflected on deeply, and these very practical examples as well. Danielle?
Merci beaucoup, Alexandre. Always a pleasure to hear you. And I'm sure that all of us will continue our weekend with more things to reflect on. And we hope to see all of you in September as we resume more activities. So we will have more speakers. We will have also once a month a prayer session. So we will meditate on the different aspects of Fratelli Tutti. So all of you who are with us today, I will ask you to pray for us as we are going next week to the conference in Rome for the 30th anniversary of the Fondation CAPP. So for all of us, we thank you and please keep us in your prayers. Thank you.